Hello, everyone. Welcome to Poetry at Tech. I'm Travis Denton. I have the good fortune of being the Associate Director of the program. Thanks for joining us tonight from the comfort of wherever you are. I hope you're in your pajamas. Hope you're comfortable. It's hard to believe, but this is our final reading of the 2020-21 season of Poetry at Tech. It seems like we're just getting started with the season, but it has been a fun one. Thanks for all your support of this season. Like so many other programs around the country and the world, we've spent this entire season virtually. And honestly, it's been a thrill to see just how technology has made it possible for so many to be a part of these readings. So many who under normal circumstances wouldn't be able to attend. In fact, tonight we have attendees from all over the country and the world with us. It's great to see so many united in poetry. But, of course, I am looking forward to the time when we can all come back together at the Crest Auditorium. But looking at our audience, it's wonderful to see so many old friends and new with us. This season, we brought poets such as Ross Gay, Dennis Smith, Victoria Chang, J.C. Riley, Natalie Diaz, Kiyomi Urama, Vivi Francis, Hanif Adurakib, Alzina Mort, as well as poets from Belarus and Germany. And tonight we're going to add to that list Bruce McEver, Maggie Smith, and Arthur throughout the season. And thank you for being here, Bruce and Maggie and Arthur. It's a pleasure to have you. Poetry at Tech's been around since 2000. We got our start when two Georgia Tech alums, Henry Bourne and Bruce McEver, unbeknownst to one another, and both with this crazy idea that Georgia Tech students and the surrounding community needed more poetry instruction. We needed community workshops. We needed to visit local schools and share poetry with as many as we could. They thought there should be a program at Georgia Tech to do just that. Well, that thought turned out to be a stroke of genius. And it's because of their gifts that we're here. We're going strong more than 20 years later and nearly 350 visiting poets later. Bruce left Georgia Tech and went on to a successful career, but Bruce is also an accomplished poet and creative, and you'll see that in just a moment. We're glad to have you with us tonight, Bruce. Thanks for being back at Poetry at Tech, along with Maggie and Arthur, to close out the season. Well, what do you say we get going? I'm ready to get to the poetry. Here's Ilya Kaminsky.
Thank you, Travis, and thank you all for being here today. Lyric poem, Edward Hirsch tells us, is a social act of a solitary maker. It gives a voice to the unspoken. It chronicles inner life. Bruce McEver's poems do just that. They investigate the unspoken, the moment that we whisper to ourselves when no one can hear us. Former U.S. Poet Laureate Billy Collins says that McEver writes poems with his head and heart, but also his ear, which is keenly attuned to the soundscapes of English. To this, I would add that while some poets write about loss in elegies and requiems, and others write about it in poems of meditation that search for the deeper truths, I feel Bruce McEver wants to do both of those things. He combines emotion and search for meaning. Each thing, he says, quote, can become a mystery whose roosters carry up the morning. Bruce McEver is the author of several books of poetry, most recently, like Lesser Gods. And his writings have appeared in many literary journals, including Plowshares, Atlanta Review, the Cortland Review, and others. He has been a great supporter for many years of our programs at Poetry at Tech, and also of poetry programs at the Poets House in New York City. Please give him a very warm welcome. Bruce McEver.
Thank you, Ilya, for that introduction. And thank you and Travis for carrying on Poetry at Tech. It's amazing the audience that we have tonight and what we've accomplished or what you've accomplished over the years. As you said, I'm a tech graduate. I grew up in Atlanta, actually on the south side near the airport. My father was a Delta pilot, and I was a Boy Scout, and I was the nature counselor at the Burt Adams Boy Scout camp. And a reason I mentioned that is that this first poem is I wrote this past year. And so what did I do during the pandemic? Well, when things got tough, I observed nature, and I think we can learn a lot from watching it. This is called Ode to Pelicans. I love these birds. They look like flying dinosaurs, survivors of the Jurassic extinction. They soar wingman to wingman in a formation over the channel where this morning a bay breeze diffuses sunrise over the following wave. Ancient hunters, the flight soon spots their prey and like dive bombers plunge to stun fish, then scoop them up and flip breakfast into their yellow pouches, swallowing it down head first. The only species to so stun their victims before they're off for another run, working together over the length and breadth of the channel between the estates on the canal bank, agnostic of the neighborhood. Evolution's lab gave them an impact-resistant skull and a membrane eye covering to survive their high dive hunting technique. They follow fish schools in and out with the morning tide, as they have before this development of dredged mud and rock and shell 8 canals into their mangrove swamps and move their rookeries further south. They are older and maybe wiser than we, and in them the world rebalances. I think it's amazing, God's laboratory. These are the brown pelican's the only bird that stuns its prey, and it's lasted since that whatever that extinction was. We learn a lot from them. Anyway, this next one's from my first book of poems, and it's about the company that I started, or the time that I had spent 20-something years traveling the United States and dealing with financial institutions. We've merged, the company I started has merged probably 500 of these things, and this was a securities firm in Minneapolis that was brought down by a rogue trader, and we were there to do an evaluation and bring its credit back and actually help save the company. I love early morning in a new hotel, traveling west and up on East Coast time before room service starts delivery, searching the lobby and even down in the kitchen for coffee to greet dawn with the night clerk. I find papers from a bundle and by the revolving door and a town map from the tourist rack to discover where I am and what's been happening, having missed the previous day sequestered with clients in a windowless conference room. I hardly notice a busboy picking up last night's glasses and emptying ashtrays to start the lobby over with a worn smile by 7. I began to feel oddly comfortable before the stir of day, unhurried and almost at home in the contrived elegance of overstuffed couches, old marble, and mirrors. I wonder how much of my life has been spent, just like my father's, in rented rooms and strange beds, with our precious time neatly folded and packed into suitcases and carried between the unforgiving schedule of people complaining. My late wife was an opera singer, and we would contrive with one another trips to, meet up in certain towns. That was sort of our routine. She unfortunately died suddenly on Christmas of the year 2000. And this is a poem about the day after that. It's called Many Paths, and it has an epigram. That very spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. This is Romans 8:26. Christmas morning below zero, the day after she died, my breath freezing. I am dazed as I walk into the barnyard to recall our happiness with the animals there. Sagging cedar gates close behind me. My quarter horse, Cinnamon, spots me over 100 yards distant and begins his long lope. Soon his soft muzzle is rubbing my face, warm, then her horse, and soon the whole herd, joined by the goats and the dog. They ring me in a circle of compassion. Touched and yet unbelieving, I look up into a blinding cold sun and feel a release. An energy courses the length of my body, and something says again and then again, there are many paths. Nothing has ever been so clear. I think that's called an epiphany. And it changed my life, and I changed the control of the firm. It's now run by a very capable partner. And I sent me to Harvard Divinity School, where I was trying to figure out what those other paths are. And I wrote this next poem at Harvard. One cold night, I was feeling pretty down, and so I bought some tulips to cheer me up. And this is on the economics of it's also about the economics of tulips. Tulips surprise me like a yellow sunrise, igniting from my coffee table. Bought last night in a cold rain, they stand radiant in a tall vase, leaning toward the window, savoring the morning light. How perfectly they spill, each leaf folded to embrace the tumbler's edge. Flown from Holland's field where we biked last spring between astounding rows of color. They were the fancy of Turkish sultans, gifted to Dutch botanists, who hybridized them to become dazzling. Tulip mania became endemic. Then the deluded traded their homes for a single bulb. Today it's big business, this bounty of bulbs, fresh cut and air expressed around the world. These bright missionaries come to spread joy through impersonal cities, come to roust us from our comfortable beds and wake us from our morning slow. Well, the Dutch tulip bulb is one of the great bubbles of all time, and I think we are coming back to that with SPACs and speculation and Robin Hood and all the rest on Wall Street. I've watched it a long time, and this is going to be a good one. Anyway, it's also tropical agriculture is huge, and I worked for a company called Brook Von Levy. Once they were one of my clients, and they were the ones that brought flowers in from Africa and such. It's really quite an amazing business. So, a little meditation on tulips. I traveled a lot after my wife died, and I thought that we should take the company to Asia, and I started an office in Australia. We have a great team there now. But if you've ever, the place to go is New Zealand. The northern island is being shaped by volcanic activity, and the southern island by glaciers. And glaciers, they're having a tough time with this global warming. So this is to these glaciers. This is called On Fox Glacier. I squint at the icy spines of the Fox Glacier, shimmering white up its back to the New Zealand mountaintop. Like a frozen dragon regurgitated from the lowest rungs of Dante's hell, this holdover from the Ice Age defends its turf against global warming. Chill breaths Chill breeze down the entire valley. It sculpts even Brown's tree ferns in the rainforest below. The size of the cavernous cerulean mouth and crevices awe. A little dirty and gray around the edges, it devours boulders and reduces them to gravel, grist for the milky lapidary melt spilling down the excavation. This river of ice of 1,000 years of snow advances winters and retreats summer in a geological rhythm compounding conventional time. Wearing down defiant granite, it grinds to smooth submission the mountains and valleys alike, determined like its ancestors who polished up Central Park and Yosemite, all those vassals from the kingdom of coal. Well, if you live as long as I have, you have events happen, and I was badly disappointed trade at one point, and you've got to get that out of your system. And so I went off to the Adirondacks to do that. This is called On the Island of the Smiling Loon. Afternoon rain tingles on the cabin's pane, washing the memory into the lake, moating the Pine Island. Despite all efforts to forget, betrayal pits your stomach. You know you must forgive or give it up to God. Compassion sleeps beside you, sharing her island, and somewhere in the water lilies, a loon wails, that haunting sound, hearkening something time-worn, going back to the primordial, clean living and faith, keeping your word. Those white and black feathered birds seek clear waters, stand their ground, and mate for life. Well, I did find a soulmate, and she lives here and lives in Aspen, and I faced another challenge soon after I met her. This is called Roaring Fork. It's a river that runs through Aspen. We bike a trail by the rain-swollen river, muddy, boiling, and hell-bent downstream over rocks and rills, under poles of pine, reaching skyward in the eternal aspens quaking riverside. The stream cuts a V through bedrock and swaths down valley. Impressive, this power of water, the yin. Verdant slopes reach to red rocks patched with remnant snows, red peaks patched with remnant snows. Above the tree line of Aspen's mountain, like noble muses, they stand over this town bursting with the summer crowd here, or the annual Ideas Festival. Its congregants, their world swiftly simplified, all tagged and imbibing inspiration from the mountains and speakers in tents and halls. If we would only follow the logic proposed here, work together with goodwill, but then the cancer of reality always intrudes once we travel home from these summer meadows. I try to forget the adenosarcoma found a week ago in my lung. I must face when I leave this place. But I'm together with my friend, a lady who brought me here, makes me brave, and rides beside me into this dark valley. This is the last poem I started to call The Flattening of the Curve. I think I may change it to what I did during the pandemic. It was the time of the quarantine. Governments panicked, ordering social distancing, the law of the land, to flatten the surge of the stricken. The strange virus from China had flown with bats out of Mongolian caves and jet sped to spread its curse around the world. Here, the police cordon off park benches and the beaches like crime scenes with yellow tape. We soon rebelled, as did our neighbors, who came out quiet at sunsets, like the ancients gathering at Stonehenge to pay their respects to the waning day, observing the orange orb sink into the placid gulf, feeling in its absence a new presence, watching close as slack waves lapped the forbidden sandy shore and dared to read poetry. So we had a little socially distanced cocktail hour at sunset, and that's got us through the pandemic. I've got you can read about my life in a book that's coming out in October called Many Paths by C&R Press. Anyway, thank you very much, he and Travis. I'm looking forward to our other distinguished poets hearing them. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for these beautiful poems. The way the image and emotion come together, they really accomplish a moving response, I think. Thank you. Last year, Bruce and I happened to be at a poetry festival in Florida. We sat together in the front row when Maddie performed, and we looked at each other and we knew that Maddie just has to come to Poetry Attack and present to our community as well. There is, I guess I'm going to use a quote from W.H. Auden simply because it says it best when he says that poetry is a clear expression of mixed feelings. And this has been a lot of years of mixed feelings, a lot of hard years. And Maddie's poetry came on a scene and moved a whole lot of people, found a way for a whole lot of people to respond. Maggie Smith is a deeply beloved poet. She is the author of several poetry books, including Good Bones, which in a time of crisis has given hope and comfort to thousands of readers. Now, how can a poetry book do that, you might ask? It is because Maggie's book asks impossible questions, which is, how can a parent teach her children to love our difficult, our troubled world? And she answers this question not in rhetoric, but in music, in imagery, in surprising turns of phrase that teach us, despite all the odds, how to be tender. Yes, poetry can do that. The National Book Critics Circle Award winner Eddie Limon calls Maddie Smith's poems, quote, truthful, tender, unafraid of the dark, the poem that are lyrically charged love letters to a world in desperate need of her generous eye. To this I personally would add that Smith's poems are also very carefully and precisely crafted. She is a master of metaphor, tone, and syntax. I think she believes that poetry should be memorable, a memorable speech, that we should carry it in our bodies, no matter where we go. Maggie Smith is the author of Good Bones, The Well Speaks of a Sovereign Poison, Lamp of the Body, and the national bestseller, Keep Moving, Notes on Loss, Creativity, and Change. Her latest collection of poems, Golden Red, will be released in July 2021. Smith's poems and essays are published in places like Best American Poetry, New York Times, New Yorker, Paris Review, and others. In 2016, her poems Good Bones went viral internationally and has been translated into over a dozen languages. Public Radio International called it the official poem of 2016. Please give Maddie Smith a very warm welcome.
Oh, goodness. Ilya, thank you. And thank you for having me. Thanks to you and to Travis. Thank you, Bruce, for that beautiful reading. I'm so excited to hear Arthur read too. This is so special. So thank you for having me. I think I'm going to start with some poems from Good Bones, and then I'll move on and read a few poems from the new book, from Goldenrod, which will be out in July. So this poem is called First Fall. I'm your guide here. In the evening dark morning streets, I point and name. Look, the sycamores, their mottled paint-by-number bark. Look, the leaves rusting and crisping at the edges. I walk through Schiller Park with you on my chest. Stars smolder well into daylight. Look, the pond, the ducks, the dogs paddling after their prized sticks. Fall is when the only things you know, because I've named them, begin to end. Soon I'll have another season to offer you, frost soft on the window and a porthole side there, ice leaving the bare gray branches. The first time you see something die, you won't know it might come back. I'm desperate for you to love the world because I brought you here. So this book, Good Bones, is a lot about being a parent. It's actually less about my children than it is, I think, about the existential shift that happens when you are suddenly in charge of other humans. And it wouldn't have been possible without the words and thoughts of those small, wise people. There's a series of poems in this book that I call nonnets, which just means sort of not quite a sonnet. They're 14-line poems that have a little bit of a rhetorical turn around line 9-ish, but there's no meter and no rhyme. And the thing that these poems all have in common is the epigraph, which is, all of them have an epigraph, which is a question that my daughter asked me in preschool when we were in the car running errands. Anytime we would get in the car, she would ask me big questions that were impossible to answer on the way to the CVS or the post office or the library. So this poem is called Sky, and the epigraph from her, I think age 3, is, why is the sky so tall and over everything? What you draw as a blue stripe high above a green stripe, white interrupted. The real sky starts at the tip of each blade of grass and goes up, up, as far as you can see. Our house stops at the roof, at the glitter-black overlap of shingles where the sky presses down, bearing the weight of space, dark and sparkling, on its back. Think of sky not as blue, not as over, but as the invisible surround, a soft suit you wear close to the skin. When you walk, the soles of your feet take turns on the ground, but the rest of you is in the sky, enveloped in sky. As you move through it, you make a tunnel in the precise size and shape of your body. That is not the answer I gave my daughter in the car, lest you think I would torture her with sonnets as responses while running errands. This is kind of a sister poem to that one. The title is a run-in, so it goes straight into the first line of the poem. At your age, I wore a darkness, several sizes too big. It hung on me like a mother's dress. Even now, as we speak, I am stitching a darkness you'll need to unravel. Unraveling another you'll need to restitch. What can I give you that you can keep? Once you asked, does the sky stop? It doesn't stop. It just stops being one thing and starts being another. Sometimes we hold hands and tip our heads way back, So the blue fills our whole field of vision. So we feel like we're in it. We don't stop. We just stop being what we are and start being what? Where? What can I give you to carry there? These shadows of leaves, the lace and solace, this soft hand-me-down darkness. What can I give you that will be of use in your next life, the one you will live without me? I'm kind of a word nerd, as my kids call me, and I can't look at the word solace without seeing the word lace tucked inside of it. So that's sort of where that came from. I'll read Good Bones, because I often do. Life is short, though I keep this from my children. Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways. 1,000 deliciously ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible, and for every kind stranger, there is one who would break you, though I keep this from my children. I am trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking you through a real shithole chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. All right, I think I'll switch over to Goldenrod now, which is just a galley at this point. It's uncorrected, so hopefully I won't find mistakes while I'm reading some of the poems. These poems are the ones I wrote right after I finished the poems in Good Bones. So really, this could just be one big book. I think of these poems as sort of continuing the conversation that I began having with myself and with readers in Good Bones. This poem is called This Sort of Thing Happens All the Time. You think you've memorized the calls of North American birds, particularly in the east, but one night you hear a call like a whistle someone is not blowing hard enough. The ball inside just rattling, rolling. You see a forested mountain and dusk is suddenly thick with words, as if you could hover your cursor above the pastiche of greens and see each name pop up. Juniper, citrine, celadon, hunter. I'd say only in a dream, but doesn't this sort of thing happen all the time? One night you find yourself on a dark street in the suburbs with air that smells like cut grass, jungle, myrtle, viridian, spring, and laundry steam. You're standing too close to a lit house which could be yours. Is it yours? And through blue windows you watch the evening news. The anchor's mouth is moving, but outside you hear only crickets in the cold, dewy lawn. Crickets and that broken-sounding bird. Then one dog barking. Then two. This is the title poem, Goldenrod, written from the passenger seat of a moving car somewhere near Peoria. I'm no botanist. If you're the color of sulfur and growing at the roadside, you're goldenrod. You don't care what I call you, whatever you were born as, you don't know your own name. But driving near Peoria, the sky pink-orange, the sun bobbing at the horizon, I see everything, is what it is, exactly, in spite of the words I use. Black cows, barns falling in on themselves. You, dear flowers born with a highway view, forgive me if I've mistaken you. Goldenrod, whatever your name is, you are with your own kind. Look, the meadow is a mirror full of you, your reflection repeating, Whatever you are, I see you, wild yellow, and I would let you name me. I was thinking about the Avon lady the other day and how we had one living across the street. In the first house I lived in with my parents, which I moved from when I was 6 years old, but I have very clear memories of that house. And on Lilacwood Avenue, and this poem mostly takes place there. It's called Talk of Horses. Funny what swims up in the mind. Sample lipsticks, thimble-sized, that the Avon lady handed my mother at our front door. We lived on Lilacwood Avenue. I was 4 or 5, maybe even younger, eyeing the pinks, reds, corals the size of my pinky tip. When we lived in that house, I remember visiting my aunt and uncle in the country. They had cherry trees. I can see myself under them, looking up into the branches. My grandfather lived in the country too, in a big house with his new wife. Didn't they have horses? While my grandmother rented a small apartment in the city near the shopping mall where she worked. All these pieces, what did they add up to? Tiny lipsticks, cherry trees, talk of horses I don't think I saw at the house where my grandfather lived with his third wife, the one who seemed so dazed we secretly called her the spun pheasant. Later, my grandfather lost almost everything in their divorce. Later, my grandmother lost almost everything in her mind, but a few memories swam up now and then to wake her. All these pieces. If this were a mystery, we'd consider them clues. But isn't this a mystery? I think I'll read one more. This will be my last poem, and it is a poem written during the pandemic. The oldest poems in Goldenrod were written 2015-ish, as I was finishing the work on Good Bones, and the last 3 or 4 poems that I added to the book were written during 2020. So this is one of the newer ones. And I think the title contextualizes things fairly well. During lockdown, I let the dog sleep in my bed again. Last night, my daughter cried at bedtime. Of loneliness, she said. She's seen the graph, the jagged mountain we need to press into a meadow, and maybe she pictures the drive home from southern Ohio, how the green hills flatten without us doing a damn thing. No sacrifice required. I tell her the steep peak makes loneliness our work, makes an honorable task of it. But I shut myself in the bathroom and cry hard into a hand towel. I walk alone in the snow, squinting up into the big wet flakes, letting them bathe my face. I tell myself it is a kind of touch. I tell myself it will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maggie. So moving. Very beautiful poems. Thank you. The kind of a passion and attentiveness in Maggie's poems, I thought would be a wonderful bridge to Arthur's reading as well, because there's so much attentiveness to the world in Arthur's poems as well. I have no hesitation whatsoever in saying that Arthur Z is a living legend. Only a few poems can be called classic in their lifetimes, and Arthur is certainly one of those. There are many different camps in contemporary American poetry, many different opinions. Poets like to have opinions. But I think everyone will agree in their admiration for Arthur's work. What is poetry for Arthur Z? You might want to ask. Well, to my mind comes the philosopher Simone Weil, who once said that absolute unmixed attentiveness is a prayer. And I do believe that Arthur Z subscribes to this notion. His poems are meticulous in their craft and contemplative in their tone. Their generous attentiveness gives us a panorama of images that can vary from philosophy to science to modern-day American reality, but one thing remains consistent. There is always precision in these poems. Reading them, you get the sense that for this poet, attentiveness to the world is holy. Arthur Z has received many honors for his work. He has won the National Book Award for Poetry and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. He also received American Book Award, Lennon Foundation Award in Literature, Guggenheim Fellowship, and other distinctions. It's an honor to have him with us at Poetry Attack today. Please give Arthur Z a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Ilya. It's such a pleasure to be reading this evening with Bruce and Maggie. I want to thank Travis, and again, thank you, Ilya, for bringing us all together. What a special evening. I'm going to be reading some poems from my new and collected poems, The Glass Constellation. So I'll be drawing from a couple of different books, as well as the section of new poems. And I had to smile when I heard Bruce read his poem with the loon in it, because I'm starting with a poem called Midnight Loon. Burglars enter an apartment and ransack drawers. Finding neither gold nor cash, they flee. Leaving the laundry and bathroom lights on, they have fled themselves. I catch the dipping pitch of a motorcycle, iceberg hues in clouds. The gravel courtyard's a midnight garden, as in Japan, raked to resemble ocean waves in moonshine, whirlpool eddies, circular ripples, and nothing is quite what it appears to be. When I unlatch the screen door, a snake slides under the weathered decking. I spot the jagged hole edged with glass where a burglar reached through the window, but no one marks the poplars darker with thunder and rain. In moonlight, I watch the whirlpool hues of clouds drift over our courtyard, adobe walls, and gate. And though there is no loon, a loon calls out, over the yard, over the water. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the presence of Los Alamos as the birthplace of the atom bomb is always, like it or not, in my consciousness, because as beautiful as the landscape of northern New Mexico is, the history of modern technology is always there. And this next poem is called Fault Lines. He pours water into a cup. At room temperature, the cup is white. But after he microwaves it, and before steeping a tea bag with mint leaves, he notices outlines of shards have formed above the water. As the cup cools, the lines disappear. Now he glimpses fault lines inside himself and feels a Siberian tiger pace along the bars of a cell. Black, orange, white. Black, orange, white. And feels how the repeating chord sends waves through him. His eyes glisten and he tries to dispel the crest. But what have I done? What can I do? throbs in his arteries and veins. Today, he will handle plutonium at the lab and won't consider beryllium casings. He situates the past in the slight aroma of mint rising in the air. Sometimes he feels like an astronaut suspended above Earth, twisting on an umbilical cord. Sometimes he's in the crosshairs of a scope, and tiger stripes flow in waves across his body. Courtyard fire. At autumn equinox, we make a fire in the courtyard. Sparks gust into the black air, and all seasons are enfolded in these flames. Snow gathers and tips the lilac twigs. A stinkhorn rises out of dirt below a water spout. Ants climb the peony stalks. And gazing into coals, I skydive and pass through stages of youth. At first, I climb a tower and looking out, find the world tipped. Then I dash through halls. If ripening is all, what can the dead teach us? We who must rage and lust, hurdle zigzagging between cars in traffic, affirm the call to abandon illusions is a call to abandon a condition that requires illusions. And as I pull the cord, spring rips and blooms. On landing, I sway on earth. This next poem is in the voice of salt, speaking to a person. It's called Salt Song. Sunnis make shrines on the way to a lake where I emerge, and Miwoks gather me out of pools along the Pacific. The cheetah thirsts for me, and when you sprinkle me on ribeye, you have no idea how I balance silence with thunder in crystal. You dream of butterfly hunting in Madagascar, spelunking through caves echoing with dripping stalactites. And you don't see how I yearn to shimmer an orange aurora against flame. Look at me in your hand. In Egypt, I scrub the bodies of kings and queens. In Pakistan, I zigzag upward through 26 miles of tunnels before drawing my first breath in sunlight. If you heat a kiln to 2,380 degrees and scatter me inside, I vaporize and bond with clay. In this unseen moment, a potter prays because my pattern is out of his hands. And when I touch your lips, you salivate. And when I dissolve on your tongue, your hair rises. Ozone unlocks. A single stroke of lightning sizzles to earth. Ilya mentioned the use of science, and I'm a science dropout, actually, and it took me a number of years to be comfortable using the language and structures of science in my poems. And this next poem is called Doppler Effect. It's a short poem, but Doppler effect is usually thought of as sound waves or waves maybe that rise in pitch and lower in pitch, say like when a siren passes by you on the street. And in this case, I was thinking of internal waves that sort of rise and fall. Doppler effect. Stopped in cars, We are waiting to accelerate along different trajectories. I catch the rising pitch of a train. Today, 109 people died in a stampede converging at a bridge. Radioactive water trickles underground toward the Pacific Ocean. Nickel and copper particulates contaminate the Brocade River. Will this planet sustain 10 billion people? Switch it. A spider plant leans toward a glass door, and 6 offshoots dangle from it. The more I fingered the clay slab into a bowl, the more misshapen it became. Though I have botched this, bungled that, the errancies reveal it would not be better if things happened just as I wished. A pufferfish inflates on deck. A burst of burnt rubber rises from pavement. Adamant. Deer browse at sunrise in an apple orchard, while honey locust leaves litter the walk. A neighbor hears gunshots in the bosque and wonders who's firing at close range. I spot bear prints near the Powaki River, but see no sign of the reported mountain lion. As chlorophyll slips into the roots of a cottonwood and the leaves burst into yellow gold, I wonder, where's our mortal flare? You can travel to where the Tigris and Euphrates flow together and admire the inventions of people living on floating islands of reeds. You can travel along an archipelago and hike among volcanic pools steaming with water and sulfuric acid, but you can't change the eventual adamant body. Though death might not come like a curare-dipped dart blown out of a tube or slam at you like surf breaking over black lava rock, it will come. It will come, and it unites us, brother, sister, boxer, spinner, in this pact, while you inscribe a letter with trembling hand. And here are a few poems from the section of new poems. A very short one, Pitch Blue. I can't stop. Wading into a lake. Skipping one flat stone after another across the surface of a pond. In a sarcophagus, lapis inlaid along the eyelids of a death mask. Wool oxidizing when pulled out of the dye bath. Like a deserted village with men approaching on horseback. The moment before collision. Never light this match. This next poem is called Ravine, and there's a Chinese poet by name Gu Cheng, who was one of the Misty School poets at the end of the Cultural Revolution in China, when all the poetry was socialist, realist, like communes are, producing rice and production is up 1,000%. At the end of the Cultural Revolution, a whole group of young poets, including Beidao, Gu Cheng, Yang Lian, among others, wrote a very different kind of lyrical, imagistic poetry. And I met Gu Cheng in China in 1985, and I'll never forget, he said to me, he thought writers, artists in America and in the West thought that they chose to be artists. And Gu Cheng said, in the East, we don't choose these things, we yield to our fate. Well, Gu Cheng left China, and after Tiananmen, he died tragically in New Zealand. And one day visiting the University of Oklahoma, I was stunned to walk into an archival room and see this blotch of calligraphy, and it was the word fate. And the person who invited me said, "Oh, Gu Chung wrote that in exile in Germany." This poem is called Ravine. Stopping to catch my breath on a switchback, I run my fingers along the leaves of a yucca, each blade curved, sharp, radiating from a core. In this warmest of Novembers, the dead push out of thawing permafrost. In a huge blotch of black ink that hangs framed on a wall, Gu Chung wrote the character Fate, and a woman shrugs, "When you look at me, you're far away." Last night, gazing at Orion's belt and sword sparkling in the sky, I saw how we yearn for connection where no connection exists. What belt? What sword? Glancing at boulders in the ravine, I catch a flock of Steller's jays scavenging along the ground. I scavenge among pine needles for one to breathe into flame. Gaze at yuccas whose blades collect dew at dawn, and at dusk, floating in sunlight above a trail. This next poem is called The White Orchard, and it's an experiment in repetition. I gave myself the stricture of writing a poem where each line picked up a word or words from the previous line, and that includes the title. So it's also an experiment in musicality to a poem. It's called The White Orchard. Under a supermoon, you gaze into the orchard. A glass blower shapes a glowing orange mass into a horse. You step into a space where you once lived. Crushed mica glitters on plastered walls. A raccoon strolls in moonlight along the top of an adobe wall. Swimming in a pond, we notice a reflected cottonwood on the water. Clang, a deer leaps over the gate. Every 15 minutes, an elephant is shot for its tusks. You mark a bleached, earless lizard against the snowfall of this white page. The skins of eggplants glistening in a garden, or bodies glistening by firelight. Those skunks once ravaged corn or bright moments cannot be ravaged. Sleeping near a canal, you hear lapping waves. At dawn, waves lapping, and the noise of men unloading scallops and shrimp. No noise of gunshots. You focus on the branches of 100-year-old apple trees. Opening the door, we find red and yellow rose petals scattered on our bed. Then light years. You see pear branches farther in the orchard as the moon rises. Branches bending under the snow of this white page. And this is my last poem. It's the last poem to this new book. It's called Transpirations. Leafing branches of a backyard plum. Branches of water on a dissolving ice sheet. Chatter of magpies when you approach. Lilacs lean over the road, weighted with purple blossoms. Then the noon sun shimmers the grasses. You ride the surge into summer. Smell of pinon crackling in the fireplace. Flute notes of a saxophone in the air. Not by sand running through an hourglass, but by our bodies igniting. Passing in the form of vapors from a living body. This world of orange sunlight and wildfire haze. World of iron filings pulled toward magnetic south and north. Pool of quicksilver when you bend to tie your shoes. Standing, you well up with glistening eyes. Have you lived with utmost care? Have you articulated emotions like the edges of leaves? Adjusting your breath to the seasonal rhythm of grasses? Gazing into a lake on a salt flat and drinking in reflection the Milky Way. Thank you.
Wow, that was really wonderful. That was fantastic. Thanks so much, Maggie. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Arthur, for closing out the season of Poetry at Tech in such a wonderful way, and for bringing your just sweet and generous spirits with you and sharing it with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
You.
Thank you, everybody.
You're very welcome. Well, I have some more thank yous as well. Let's end with gratitude. That's the way that we, Ilya and I, like to end all of our events. We end with gratitude. I just thanked the poets, Maggie, Bruce, Arthur. Thank you, guys. And I want to thank all of you, our audience, who have joined us tonight and supported us throughout this season. You always have a poetry home at Poetry at Tech, so I want you to keep coming back. And we're going to keep letting you know about our events, and we're going to keep welcoming you. Huge thanks to Team Poetry at Tech, our squad, as we like to call it. Ganda Prasad, he's our technical wizard. He keeps us on the rails, or the website. He's in the background pushing all the buttons tonight, making sure the reading comes off. So thank you, Skanda. Bianca Bordianu. Bianca is our social media whip. She keeps us out there in the world. So thank you very much, Bianca, for all you do. And, of course, thanks to our partner, the Atlanta Global Studies Center. Thank you very much. Glad to have you on board. Joining us tonight is President Cabrera, President of Georgia Tech. We appreciate you being here and for taking the time to join us and celebrating poetry with us. Thanks very much. And, of course, thanks to Richard Utz. Richard Utz is our fearless chair of the Department of Literature, Media, and Communication. Thanks for your support of the arts at Georgia Tech. And, of course, we're working to make LMC the home of the arts at Georgia Tech. Need I say more? Thanks, Richard. Coming up at Poetry at Tech, I'll be conducting a workshop, leading a workshop on April 17th. You can go to the Poetry at Tech website to register for that. I'd love to see many of you there. And, of course, Ilya and I are hard at work planning the next season of Poetry at Tech. And well, frankly, we have some things up our sleeves that we're very excited to share with you. So we'll be sharing that very soon. But thanks for joining us, everyone. And until next time, stay safe and keep in touch.